Today we're diving into the mess that Sony's making with its games as service strategy, or at least the perceived mess, because whether or not it's actually a mess, I'm not sure. However, I do think the fact that reporters are reporting negatively on Sony shows you where the perception is. With Jim Ryan recently announcing that he's going to be stepping down from PlayStation, which I believe takes effect in March, I think we're at no man's land for PlayStation. We're in uncharted territory. That's a better way to say it. For PlayStation. PlayStation, I think, got caught flat-footed. I've said it before. I will say it again. And I've said that before, and I'll say it again. Sony got caught flat-footed. I don't think they thought Game Pass would ever be a thing. I don't think they thought that it would be successful, that there would be a future for it. I don't think that they thought cloud would be a future. I think they thought that forever their first-party titles would sell their consoles, and that's how it would go for forever. I think they, since then, and since the Activision Blizzard acquisition, they have seen like, oh, shoot, we were wrong. This is actually going to be a thing. And they're scrambling. They're scrambling to know what to do. And so we have this news story here. Now, this was broken by Jason Schreier over at Bloomberg. This is actually a news story at xfire.com. First-party Sony studios are reportedly uncomfortable with pivot towards games as a service. And I think that there's a little bit of a point here. Here is my thing. I think Jason Schreier is an incredibly talented journalist. I think he's a talented writer. He has an agenda, though. And I think that I have an agenda. When you watch my content, you need to view my content through the prism of my agenda. And that is, I'm an Xbox guy. I'm an Xbox fanboy. So all of my content needs to be viewed through that prism. All of Jason Schreier's content needs to be viewed through the prism of he is very much for unionizing game workers, game developers. It's his shtick. It's what he's written books on. And so anything that advances that, I think he reports on. So first-party studios have reportedly told him, members of first-party studios, that they're uncomfortable with Sony's pivot towards games as service. My question is, okay, what is that representative of? Is that 1% of studio workers or employees at these studios? Is that the head of these studios? Is that 51%? Because those are two wildly different stories if that's the case. Sony has to go to games as a service. They have to have it as part of your portfolio. I think Sony sees that. It's why they went and got Destiny. I do think that Sony being caught flat-footed shows you that there is a little bit of an identity crisis. Now, if you're a Sony guy and you're watching this, you're thinking, what do you mean there's an identity crisis? Sony is absolutely crushing it at the moment. They're crushing PlayStation 5 sales. They're crushing first-party titles. Yes. That's not what I'm talking about. This entire video on this topic in particular, we have other topics, but on this topic in particular is about the future strategy. And with the future strategy going forward, I do think Sony has an identity crisis. I think they're used to being the king of narrative-driven games, and now they're diving first into games as a service, and so it leaves this question mark. I do think they've been, with the release, for instance, of their handheld device, that's not really a handheld device, with their release, even with PlayStation VR, I do think it's throw stuff at a wall and see what sticks kind of mentality, which I'm all for, that strategy, actually. But when it comes to future strategy, I don't know that Sony knows what, and when I say Sony, I'm talking about PlayStation 5. I'm not sure that Sony knows, that PlayStation 5 knows what it wants to be in the future. What's its future strategy? Rather, will they always be king with their current strategy? And I think the answer is no. At least that's my opinion. I think Xbox is set under the Game Pass strategy. We've talked about this before. You don't need monster hits all the time. What you need is variety. Variety is the appeal, right? You could have one monster hit a year, maybe, if that. And I would say that Starfield probably fulfills that at this point for this year, even though we've got games like Forza coming down the pike here, and we're going to talk about that. Just in fact, tomorrow it drops on early access. I cannot wait. Oh, I'm so excited for that. But you need variety. Variety is king in that space. Obviously, big blockbuster hits are going to help, of course, but it takes a lot of pressure off of constantly pumping out AAA titles. In fact, Phil Spencer talked about it in the leaked emails where he says Game Pass offers relief to this conundrum that AAA studios find themselves in, where they can't experiment and they can't, develop new IPs. Game Pass solves that. He believes that, anyways, and I tend to think that he's correct there. I don't think that he's wrong, but I do think that there's an identity crisis there. Now, the discomfort among studios here with games as a service. They did purchase Bungie. If this is true, let's assume this is 51% of workers, which I don't think that it is. I think it's a small percentage. But let's assume for lack of more information that it is 51%, that the majority of the first party studios are like, I don't know that we should go this way. That's discerning. That would be discerning. Disconcerting? Disconcerting is the word I'm looking for. That would not be good. I don't think it is, though, so we can skip this point. I think it's a small minority. Again, we have to take this news through the prism that Jason Schreier views the world, and that is he wants to unionize game developer studios. I'm not making a comment whether that's right or wrong. I'm just saying everybody has a bias. You got to view what their reports are on that bias. Anything that's going to help him progress that, I think, is what he's going to report on. I think this helps. He's always like, the big studios are bad, the independent guy, the developer, which is a noble, and I'm sure in his mind is noble. I'm not saying, again, that that's right or wrong. I'm just saying that that's the prism in which he writes. So Bungie, Sony Sony purchased Bungie. Bungie is a games as a service. Even with Bungie dominating, they're probably one of the kings, one of the top dogs that know what they're doing. Is it enough to guarantee that this is a smart move for Sony? And it's not even true ownership. It's I don't remember what the deal is, but it's not true ownership in the same way that, like, Sony's Destiny is still super independent from what I understand. But regardless, not even Bungie can guarantee you that this is a smart move for Sony. It takes a lot of money, and that's what this article talks about. It takes a lot of money. There's a lot of reward there if you can get it right, for sure. You get huge profits off of games as a service model. For instance, Fortnite is that model. But it's a huge risk because it takes a lot of resources, costs a lot of money. In this article particularly, they talk about the amount of resources. It takes a lot of developers because you have to constantly be pushing out content, which is good for us gamers, as I think it's why games as a service, when it succeeds, it really succeeds because it's really a win-win for everybody. Developers get money, you get great content all the time as a gamer, but that's incredibly difficult to do, 100%. Moral of this story, I think Microsoft has the upper hand. I think that they've been investing in games as a service for a while. I think they have experience with it. Halo Infinite's multiplayer aside, I think they purchased studios that are crushing it with games as a service. I think Activision Blizzard has that model down. And I think from a strategic future standpoint, you can see where Microsoft definitely has the upper hand. In fact, there's a part in this article. Let's scroll down to it. Let me see here real quick. Here we go. When you combine this, so this is talking about ZeniMax, Activision Blizzard, that Microsoft has a dozen games as a service games that make billions annually. When you combine this with Microsoft plans to dial in on single-player narrative titles over the next few years, the situation can get rather dire for Sony really fast if it lets up. This, quote, nightmare, unquote, scenario might have been what urged Jim Ryan to pursue such a massive undertaking regardless of risk. I think that's probably correct. It feels that way. It feels like they were caught flat-footed and they're seeing the long-term play out of this. You have to look 10 years down the road. Where does this all lie? You got to remember, Sega was at the top at one time, or was one of the top dogs in gaming and then went away as far as consoles is concerned. There's obviously a top publisher still and remain that way. It doesn't take long for entire industries and sectors to change. Amazon's jumping into the space. Google tried to jump into the space. I think Apple's jumping into the space. Facebook is jumping into the space. I think we're at a transitionary time in all of technology, including gaming, maybe none more so than gaming. And it's going to be interesting. Can Sony pull off this move to games as a service? Probably. If anyone could do it, they could do it. Is there anything behind this story with their first-party studios being uncomfortable? Yeah, I think there may be. Regardless, I do think it illustrates that Sony once again was caught flat-footed. And I think Microsoft has been pushing and driving the narrative here for the last year, and I think their strategy is set up 10 years going forward, and Sony's not quite there yet with that kind of strategy. It'll be interesting to see how they adjust, where they go from here. Let me know what you think. Do you think this is all for nothing, for naught? Do you think that there's something here? Do you think that I'm right? Do you think I'm wrong? Let me know in the comments below. Let's talk about Forza Motorsport, though, because we talked about it earlier in the day. First of all, there's a new dynamic background. I loaded mine up yesterday. It looks freaking cool. In fact, let me see. Can we play it? There it is. All it is a nice little lens flare going across your screen, the headlights moving on and off. Regardless, it's a new dynamic background. You got to be excited for a dynamic background. Let's go to the ratings, though, are starting to come in because this drops tomorrow if you've purchased early access, and it looks pretty solid. 84 on both parts. We're seeing 95s, 90s, high 80s, mid 80s here. I think this is the motorsport title that we expected. I think it was good for Forza to take time off. I'm very excited to jump in. I'm seeing tech comparisons on what this is doing. I think this is going to highlight the Xbox Series X beautifully. This is Metacritic, by the way. If that wasn't clear. But yeah, I think this is going to highlight the hardware. I think this is going to highlight Game Pass. I think if you're a racing fan and fanatic, Forza has been and will retain the title of creme de la creme for simulation racers, for closed track racers. And I'm personally very excited to jump in. I'll be jumping in tomorrow. I purchased early access. I think that's a great deal, by the way, and a great business model is you can get this on October 10th on release day. If you want to get it 10 days early, here's a premium pass upgrade for $35. I did it with Starfield. I'll do it with this. I'll do it with games that I really want to jump in and play. I think it's a great business model. Regardless, very excited. Forza's here. So we had Starfield. Now we have Forza. I mean, Game Pass is just absolutely crushing it. We've got more games coming out later in the year. And once again, we see the strategy for Xbox. I'm not sure that strategy is there yet for PlayStation, but I've been wrong before. I'm wrong frequently, actually. Let me know what you guys think. Will you be jumping into Forza? What do you think about the whole PlayStation debacle? Let me know in the comments below. If you like this video, if you like what we're doing here, we're dropping Xbox videos all of the time. Hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, share it with your friends. Love hanging out with you guys. Love discussing gaming and Xbox. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.